Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Q&A for Golf Level 2. This is basically a beautiful day here Wednesday in Oceanside, California. I think this is really something that we wanted to do for a long time, to be able to allow you guys to ask any questions that you have. We have a few questions that were already posted for the Q&A here that we'll go through. But please feel free to just go ahead and type in your questions in the Q&A section as we go through this. We will answer as many questions as we can. I'd say without any further ado, let's get started.
Right? Greg, we got a couple questions come in. Probably one, I know Charles down in New Zealand. Charles, good to see you. It's always great to see you down in Australia when we come down there. He had a question that was really about launch angle and hitting down on the ball, actually attack angle, hitting down on the golf ball as opposed to hitting up. And his question was basically that on the PGA Tour, the average downward attack angle is about 1.5 degrees according to TrackMan. Yep. But today we hear all about hitting up on the golf ball. Yep. And is there any real reason why people shouldn't hit up when the best drivers and the longest drivers in the world do hit up on the golf ball? So what would really be the reason why you'd be hitting down, and why shouldn't everybody hit up?
Yeah, I think he also was asking too if there was any physical limitations that might prevent you from hitting up. So I think that's a good place to start. In the first part of the Golf Level 2 class, we talk a lot about TrackMan, and we talk a lot about launch monitors and looking and understanding, what makes a ball go a certain distance, what makes a ball curve left to right, or what makes a ball start in a certain direction. And literally, your question is coming into distance. Yes. What makes it hit farther? So, let's review that real quick. So basically, if I want to take a ball and I want to maximize, let me see if I can get to the point where you can see me here. So if I want to hit a ball as far as I can, right? Literally, it's physics, Dave, right? So there's basically, we're sending out a projectile. If I'm going to shoot it out of our bay right here, right? If I know the speed, like let's say this is a cannon, and I know the speed that the cannonball is going to come flying out, there's an optimum angle to set the cannon, and there's an optimum spin of the cannonball that will make the ball go the farthest, right? And what we know is that if it spins too much, and let me use this ball here. You can probably see this a lot better. So if it has too much spin, the ball will balloon, go up in the air, and then drop down nice and soft. If it doesn't have enough spin, it'll be like a knuckleball will fall right out of the sky and drop down. So there's always this optimal spin. So literally, if you want to look at what makes a ball go really far, right? You've got to be able to control your launch angle. You got to be able to control your spin, right? Now, spin T is his question, right? Yeah. So we're trying to figure out how to maximize the spin, or how to make it the maximum amount of spin to keep it in the air, but not too much and not too little, right? To calculate spin, if you remember in the online class, we have a formula. Spin is created by literally two things: club head speed, so how fast the club is moving, yeah, right? And something called spin loft, right? So if you take your club head speed, you multiply it times your spin loft. And for a driver, there's a factor. If you're using a TrackMan 4, it's 2.1 for a driver. For an iron, it's 2.9. There's a range between 1.9 and 2.2. All that's on your online class. You can look at this. But really, the key thing is just there's two variables that control spin: club head speed and literally spin loft. So the only thing that's really confusing here is, number one, is the faster you swing. So the faster you're like the long drive tour, they create more spin. Absolutely. Right? Which is a negative thing if it gets too high, right? So you're like, well, wait a minute, I want to hit the ball farther, so I got to swing harder. Well, if you swing harder and your spin goes up, it could actually make you hit it shorter. That's right. But we want to swing harder, but we want to keep our spin down. So how do we do that? With that second variable, spin loft, right? So now spin loft, let's talk about spin loft. So spin loft is literally pretty simple. It's, imagine you've got, let's say this represents the club face, right? So, or let's call this the dynamic loft, right? So this is literally, dynamic loft is pretty much the loft on the face at the point of impact, yes, right? So we talk a lot about that in the online classes, because a face has bulge and roll. If you hit high on the face, it'll be more loft, low on the face, less loft. So basically, when the ball comes off the face, let's imagine this is your dynamic loft. Now the club is also traveling in three-dimensional space, either down or up, depending on which club we're doing. That's called your attack angle, right? So your attack angle is the direction the club is traveling at impact, and your dynamic loft is how much loft at the point of impact. The angle between those two, between the attack angle and that angle right there, that angle is called your spin loft. And it's simple math. It's literally, if your dynamic loft is 10 degrees and your attack angle is -2, your spin loft's 12, right? It's just 1 by 7. So now, okay, what's this got to do with spin? So think about spin. If I want to control spin, it's club head speed, maximum club head speed times spin lock. So if I want to increase my club head speed, but not increase my spin too much, I have to lower my spin lock, right? So I got to lower one number. I want to increase my club head speed. So if my spin loft is like this, the best way to decrease my spin loft is to bring these closer together. So now what do the long drive tour players do, right? Instead of taking their attack angle down, right, what do? They move it up. Now, if you look at the best hitters on the PGA Tour, the Dustin Johnsons, the Bubba Watsons, the JB Holmes, they're actually positive, 2, 3, 4 degrees positive. Now, if you look at the average PGA Tour player, take the 125 players, yes, it's down 1. But if you take the biggest hitters, it's actually positive.
And a lot of times when you have the downward angle of attack on the PGA Tour, what's skewed is you don't know what shot they're trying to hit. So they might be able to, it might be trouble right or left, and they're trying to take something off.
And sometimes they take off the tee, and sometimes it's a 3-wood.
Exactly.
But basically, just remember, we're talking long drive. If you want to get farther, the two things I can do is I can increase my attack angle and I can decrease my dynamic loft. That's why in long drive tour, guys are hitting like 4-degree drivers. Right. So they're trying to decrease their dynamic loft and they're trying to increase their attack angle. So back to your question, right? So the question was pretty simple. Is should we be trying to hit up when the average is down on the PGA Tour? Well, I always say let's try and compare ourselves to the best drivers, not the average on the PGA Tour. So let's start with that. Is that if I want to be the best driver, take the group of the best drivers and look at them, and they're actually positive. Now, for the average golfer, hey, PGA Tour average would be awesome. So 1 degree down, I'm not going to be yelling at. But the more up we get, the better, right? Because I can actually hit the ball farther, control my spin, swing harder. Now, what does that do? So what's that got to do with your physical screen? So to be able to hit a positive attack angle does require a couple things, right? So literally you want to be able to hit the ball as the club is traveling up, right? So literally the attack angles, we're looking at where the club is traveling. So if I square myself up here, this is the ball here, right? Literally here's the ball on the tee. If I come down, if I hit this as the club is traveling down, that would be a downward attack angle. If I hit this as the club has already hit the bottom of the arc and starts to travel up, that would be a positive attack angle, right? So that's why you'll see a lot of guys tee the ball up pretty high. You'll see them tee the ball forward, so it allows them to get to the bottom of the arc and go forward. So you always want to be trying up on the ball that's in the teed up, right? You
do, but and this is where the difficulty comes, I think, for the amateur golfer is when you say hit up, because a lot of people hit up by actually releasing wrist angle and
or hanging back.
Or hanging back.
Let's talk about
the
that.
best players actually hit up by using the ground correctly.
So when we say hit up, it's you're swinging normal. Here's the bottom of the arc, right? Let's see. You can see me. So literally, as I come down here, this is the bottom of the arc, and then if I keep going, if the ball's a little bit forward in my stance, I'll hit up. I'm not trying to manipulate this by hitting up, leaning back, increasing the loft, chicken winging, scooping, all those things we talked about. That would create all kinds of spin problems.
And there's ways to do that. So a lot of times in the teaching world today, you hear a lot about hitting up. Like you said, a lot of people hang back or do this. Whereas what we see with the best players is they're actually pushing against the ground. Which, as the club gets down, as they push against the ground, it raises the handle, raises the right shoulder, creates a little bit of what we call axis tilt, and that's how they hit up on the golf.
So now, what would physically, I know this is taking a long time to answer the one question, but now physically, what would be the problem? Okay, to do a driver, normal driver, for maximal power, is you're going to create a weight shift, right? So you're going to shift to your right side, and then you're going to shift to your left side. We want the same thing. We want a weight shift right, we want a weight shift left to create maximal power. If for some reason you couldn't load your back leg, right? Like let's say you had to put all your weight on your left leg, right? So for some reason in fact your question down in New Zealand is, let's say the right hip doesn't work, or let's say the right knee is a problem, they can't use it, and you had to completely unload the right side and you had to lean here. Well, now we're going to have a few issues. We're going to have some downward attack angles, right? These downward attack angles, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be very difficult for you to get on the drive. Like you said, you're going to want to try and pull up with the handle, try and do some of the things. But you'd want to try, to me, honestly, you'd want to really move the ball forward. But sometimes when you're leaning on your left leg, it just becomes hard. So we just say, if you can't beat it, you join it. We lower the ball, lower the tee, move it back, you hit a little knockdown type of hit. So to me, there's not a lot of physical reasons why I would say, hey, you shouldn't have a positive attack angle, you should keep it down. The one that would make me nervous is if the right side of the body was a problem.
Yeah.
You couldn't load the right side of the body. That could be an issue just because it's hard to create the geometry.
Yeah.
That's why we've had a lot of problems with players who just tried to stay on one side.
That's right.
All of a sudden, their short irons got better, but their long game just fell apart.
So the only one I would be conscious of, Greg, too, is internal hip rotation on the lead side, primarily because a lot of guys will laterally move, and if you keep laterally moving, it does create axis tilt, but that also creates a lot of side bend, a lot of pressure on the lower right side.
Yep.
So you want a little lateral movement, and then you want to be able to explode out of that way. So you could have some internal hip rotations on the lead.
I just want to make sure that the question, just to make sure, and I don't think this was the generation of the question, but if you're thinking you had to side bend to get positive attack angle, that is not how you get positive attack angle, right? So it's not like, if they don't have the physical ability to side bend to get the ball up in the air. No. That you don't need to side bend excessively to get the ball up in the air. You have a normal golf swing, and your normal geometry gets to the bottom of the arc before the ball. Yeah. And you get the ball far.
I mean, the simple way would be move the ball forward. And tee it high. Yep. That's the easy one.
Okay, great. And make sure you're releasing. You're not holding on the club. So that's a great question. That's question number one. I think we had another question, Dave. We had, I'm trying to remember who it's from. Let's see if we have this.
So we got a couple questions. We had another one that came in from England, and that was more on the building a center. So right now they have the GC2, and they're thinking about, which is a launch monitor. They're thinking about getting the GC4, or they're thinking about what to add to their studio. So should they add 3D, or should they invest in more camera and upgrade the launch monitor technology? Two different beasts, really.
Yeah, those are two different animals. So okay, so your question is should we upgrade our launch monitor technology or move into motion capture? Exactly. So that's a tough question, but here's how I'd answer it. Is I'm pretty sure that your launch monitor you have now is probably giving you good data.
Yes.
Right? Now, can it get better? Of course. As each version comes up, you're getting better and better information. But if I don't have motion capture and I already have launch monitors, I would probably add the motion capture. I'd probably get like a KVS or something so that I have both tools. I always feel like the more information you have, the better coach you are, right? It's not for the consumer, it's not for the player, right? This information is for you. So as a coach, if it helps you to have the kinematic sequence, then I'd have the kinematic sequence with an out-of-date launch monitor before I would just have my upgraded launch monitor and no kinematic sequence. Yeah. That's me personally. That's right. But I think everybody has to make that decision themselves, but I always feel like more information is better.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to remember too is launch monitors are a little different today. The GC Quad is a camera-based system, and then we have TrackMan, which is more of a radar-based system. And one is looking a lot more at the club, even though one can, and one is looking a lot more at the ball. So that's another thing you have to take into account is what's important.
Yeah, I think obviously the Foresight, which is the one that he was talking about, uses a lot of cameras looking at impact.
Yes.
Right. So looking at impact, and for there they can see the club, and then they use mathematical models to predict what the ball is doing.
Yeah.
TrackMan, a little different story. They're actually watching the ball, right? So it's basically they look at the ball and they work their way back to make their calculations. So it depends on what you're interested in. I would say that nowadays, because TrackMan does all the data on the PGA Tour, it's great that we have the normal data, right? Yeah. So that always helps to be able to compare what's good and what's bad.
But obviously, in the technology world, we have a lot here. I'm involved with a lot of things too. If you have more information on that and you want to email me personally, feel free, and I'll guide you as to what I would put in your learning center, so to speak.
We had a question, I'm seeing on here, we had a question about in the case where a player presents with limitations in both external and internal rotation problems in both the trail and the lead hips, and then your question was truncated. So if you're listening, it was cut off, so we don't know what the so do you know who that's from?
Looks like Morton.
Morton. So Morton, if you're listening right now, please type in your question again because the second half got cut off. So sorry about that. We did have a question on, is Golf 3 coming to Europe? Now, I can tell you that as of right now, we are about literally, I think we're launching Monday, the dates for our level 3 this year. And we have Golf level 3. Do you remember that?
Golf level 3 was the latter part of November.
It's November.
The 29th, 30th.
Here at TPI. Those dates will be out next week. We're definitely doing a level 3 here at TPI. We do that every year. I think it's really cool to come to see what all the technology and stuff we have here. We're probably definitely doing 1 or 2 of them in Asia. We haven't picked a European location yet. I would guess that it won't happen in Europe this year, but potentially next year in Europe.
Yeah.
I would say just because based on the volume of the number of people taking the class, we always look at people taking the level 2 class, Once we get to a big enough audience, level 2, then we'll come do a level 3 in that area. And right now our biggest markets are Asia and North America for online. So not saying we're not coming. We will definitely, there'll never be more than a 2-year period before we want to try and branch out there. But I would guess if we came to Europe, it would either be in England or Amsterdam.
Yeah, and we might do like a little level 3 week if we do something like that.
That's kind of what we're thinking. Okay. So guys, any questions you have? Those are, I think, the pre-populated questions. I don't know if you see any other ones that are over there. No? Okay. So if you guys have any questions, okay, here we go. All right, so Martin, so you said, how would you teach around this if a person chose not to get medical help? Okay, so back to Martin's first question. If both internal and external, you're right. In our level 2 class, we talk about if internal rotation is limited, here's how you teach around. If external rotation is limited, here's how you teach around. Your question is, what if they're both limited? Which is very common, by the way. And they didn't want to get medical help. And you said you've had 2 cases that did this. So I'll tell you my 2 cents, and then you can say your 2 cents on there. So this is probably, between the thorax and the hip, probably the 2 most common limitations you're going to see with your players, especially with your male players. I would tell you that by far, internal rotation is more important, right? Now, the reason I say that is because of a couple of things. Let me grab the club here. So when we talk about teaching around, a limitation, right? Get to the point here, perfect. So if I'm going to look at my trail hip, right? My trail hip in the backswing, you have to be able to load and rotate around that trail hip, right? Now we say on the downswing that you have to be able to externally rotate around this hip, right? But you know what? The best players in the world, you know what they do? Is the foot comes off the ground. Yeah. So honestly, if I were to look at my hip right here, it's not really externally rotated, right? It's square, it's neutral, right? So as long as I don't hang back and stay on this leg, well then external rotation is really not going to affect me in my right hip in the backswing. Now the same thing's true on backswing for the lead leg, right? On the lead leg, I don't know how to get around doing this. Now the best way to get around this is just turn the foot out, right? So you're going to have to, at some point, this foot's going to have to be planted and turned, and I can minimize my internal rotation by turning the foot out. But for external rotation, which is during the backswing, you can do what Jack Nicklaus did. You can do it. You can just lift the leg up, right? Again, so if I lift the heel up, for some reason, we have our power level 2 class this week, and Jason Zubak and I talk a lot about this. That modern coaching teaches power out of the golf swing. Yeah. It's all about trying to keep you stable and move. Back in the day, they used to lift the legs all the time, and if you lift your lead leg during the backswing and you get off your trail leg on the downswing, well, then external rotation doesn't matter. That's not that I say it doesn't matter. It's not going to impact you as much as anything else. So really, what you want to do is control internal rotation. And a lot of people, they talk about if I flare my feet out, say play like I'm a duck. Okay, I don't need to internal rotate over here, but they go, well, now it's going to affect your downswing. Well, it's not if you get off your leg. Right. And if you lift your lead leg, it's not going to do it.
And it's funny in golf today because a lot of people don't like to open and close their feet. But if you go back, having a slightly closed stance for players that can't, you want to get more rotation. That's going to open up the hip as well. The other ones, Greg, and you've talked about this, is that you actually get quite a bit of rotation from the thigh. And there are some players
below the knee too. Yeah.
And below the knee. Yeah. So even if you're tight here, if you can feel like this rotates open a little bit, it actually kind of mimic in hip rotation.
Yeah, so basically to answer your question, Morton, for me, forget about the external rotators. They're both limited. Basically, you're going to have them lift the lead heel and lift and get off the back leg during the downswing, and then control internal rotation. Have them flare out like they're a duck. Yep. And there's a lot of great players, a lot of Champions Tour players do that.
They do. And when you do that, when you flare them out.
Jr., great one to look at. He's done this forever, one of the best wedge players in the world, beat her out, and he's had a lot of success.
I think the other thing you can do too is narrow the base of support. So if you fan their foot out by narrowing the base of support, it doesn't require as much. It's a lot easier to actually rotate when you narrow the base of support.
Okay, so now it looks like, Stephen, you've got a question here. Let's see, with your tour pros, do you see a relationship between issues with the perception tests and their
SG putting?
Is that their center of gravity putting? Or I want to make sure I understand your abbreviation there, putting.
You mean depth perception like our visual tests?
Strokes gain. Okay, sorry.
Oh, strokes.
Okay. Sorry, let me read that again. So with your tour pro, do you see a relationship between issues with the perception tests and their strokes gain putting, or do they tend to find compensations? Okay, great. So I'm assuming when you say that our perception test, you're talking about our visual testing. Just give me a thumbs up on that if you're, or say yeah. Okay. So let's talk about that for a second. So first of all, tour pros are tour pros because they're great at compensating. Okay, let's put it that way. Not all tour pros are not like, hey, they pass everything, and every tour pro has their issues. They're so good at learning how to handle their compensations, right? So let's talk real quick about. And when you say perception, by the way, there's multiple things that we check in vision, and this is a good time to kind of review vision. One of the things that we check is your ability to depth percept, right? To be able to see objects at certain distances. We use the Brock string that you saw in the online class, right? So literally the Brock string, just to remind you this, is you would have a player hold that up against their nose. I would go about one hand width, one arm length away, put a bead here, and then I would have Dave, I'd say, hey Dave, I want you to stare at that bead, and I would ask him, you should see two strings going to the bead, and then do the strings intersect before the bead, at the bead, or after the bead? And you would do this at different distances, and if it was before the bead, he has something called esophoria, which means objects appear a little closer. If it was after the bead, it was exophoria, objects appear a little farther, and sometimes this depth perception become an issue. To me, most tour players, if they have that issue, they've already gone past that issue because they practice so much on distance control. They learned to see, like they go, that's 40 yards. It might be 35 yards, right? Because they think it's 40 yards because they're exophoria, but they just know how far to hit that, right? So they literally have done so much volume of practice, they're able to compensate past that with their depth perception. Sometimes different lies can affect them. If the ball feels closer, if you're esophoria, sometimes you tend to hit a little thin because so certain lies can affect them. But again, I think it's their practice volume. They start to train their eyes. Now the other thing that we check is basically your ability. Let me grab the blocks here to visualize. And maybe when you say perception, you're talking about visualization, but we use the parquetry blocks, if you remember the parquetry blocks on your class. Now the parquetry blocks are what we use to be able to measure if somebody can visualize or not.
Yes.
Now what's really important is we build these little shapes and we test our players and we ask them to try and flip the blocks in different directions. If they are a very good visualizer, literally when you look at the golf ball, if they're a very good visualizer, a lot of times, even something as simple as that simple line on the ball right there that comes with the Pro V1 here. They don't mark the ball and you see the line. Even little lines that can bother them because they're so good at lining up that if they don't line they're so good at visualizing that if they don't line the line up perfectly, it drives them crazy.
It never looks right.
So what does a tour player do? Most of these players do is they just trust their instincts and they just use the wide of the ball. Right, and they've learned to just trust what I see and don't draw lines. If they're very bad visualizers, the way you compensate for this is you don't have to become a good visualizer. You use the lines. You'll see them put the crosshairs. They'll take their putter. We don't have a putter here, but they'll
go like this and make sure it's lined up.
So they put lines on the ball. They put lines on the putter. Right, they'll put crosshairs on the putter. They'll put dots. They'll give them all those things. So in a way, I don't know if I call that compensating, but that's the solution, right? It's just help them. That's a legal way of helping you with visual compensation process. I hope that answers your question.
I think the other thing to add to that too is great putters don't like, a lot of people say you got to be laser focused, but great putters to me, they scan. They're constantly scanning. So, a guy like Phil,
and their eyes.
like a guy like Phil Mickelson who has incredible vision, like 25 vision, his ability to read the grass on the green and to constantly scan the contours of the green, the texture of the green, the color of the green. So all of those things add to visual perception.
So that's. I hope you guys are playing around with the visual testing because it's so powerful what we've learned with some of our players by doing the vision testing. I also think, and something I can't remember if we pointed this out in the online class, I think it's a great personality test too. You can see players get really frustrated with doing the block test. If they get frustrated, if you push them hard in practice, they're going to get frustrated too. And then there's some that just never quit, and you kind of learn a little bit more about who they are. Okay, so now we're gonna sit here and wait for you guys to have any other questions.
I actually have a question that I could pose to you guys if you'll respond, and that's as we continue to improve golf too, and we start adding in things. There's been a lot of talk today, Greg, about force and pressure and things like that, and how that's affecting the industry. Do people, is that something we should be taking in the golf too? It's definitely something we're looking at, because there is a lot of confusion out there on force and pressure, feet, shoes,
well, I think
arches.
what you're bringing up, Dave, is a good thing. Is anytime we do these, we're always looking for suggestions from any of you guys on things you'd like us to add to the Golf 2 class, because we're about to do a big overhaul, and you'll get all those updates as they come live. But if there's any features that you're like, I really wish that was in the Golf 2 class, please feel free to either give us the comments here or text us or email us anytime.
Yeah.
Okay? All right.
And then the other thing to remember too, Greg, is if you guys aren't attending, I would hope you would, but the World Golf Fitness Summit, we've been starting to put that together. Right now, we've got 53 speakers, I think. It's in Orlando, the 14th through the 16th of October. We'd love for you guys to be there. It's a phenomenal event, and it's really my favorite event of the year because of not only the networking, but the amount of people that come. And it's our group, so we're able to do a lot of things and learn a lot.
14th through the 16th? Somewhere in October.
14th through the 16th.
Okay, somewhere around there. But take a look at it. Yeah. So basically, the World Golf Fitness Summit is always probably the best 3 days every 2 years. It's just a cool place to network and do stuff. So, and for you guys, level 2, remember, level 3 it's free. Level 2 is $99. So it's a great value. It's also Halloween time of year here in the United States for you guys around. And we're going to go to Saturday night. I think it's Universal Studios. They have one of the best haunted house parks in the world, and that's always fun to watch everybody get scared. So we're going to do that. Okay, looks like we got one more question here. Let's see. Back that up. It's October 12th through the 14th. That's right. So just so you guys know the dates there. Hey guys, if anybody have? Oh, looks like you good. Okay, so looks like we got another question. In terms of the kinematic sequence, when does full swing pattern switch into wedges? Okay, great question. So this is something that, James Sequin and I talk about this a lot because we studied the wedge or the finesse sequence for a long time. And I think the easiest way to answer that is the following. Okay, so
something we go through in depth in Golf 3.
Oh yeah. So literally, here's my deal: is if I'm looking at a target, right? I'm looking at a target, and let's say I look at a target. If I say to myself, okay, the best way to get to that target is to do an underhand throw. So imagine I was going to go to a target right here in front of me, and I go, to get to that target, I'm just going to do this. Okay, if you feel comfortable that it would be more accurate to do an underhand throw, in my mind, it's finesse. It's a finesse sequence. Mm-hmm. If you get to the point where you're like, well, that's too far to do underhand, now I got to go overhand, I think you just switched into power kinematic sequence, right? So in your mind, for all of us, it could be different. I would say most players somewhere around the 30 to 40 yard mark, they were like, I think I need to throw this overhand. And now we'll see the normal kinematic sequence come into play. But anything below that, I would, I'd say when you get over 40 yards, it's really rare to see somebody who can do underhand accurate. Yes. I think they got to go to overhand. So I'd say switching to 30, 40 yards, but for each player, just that's the question. Would you do the underhand or overhand? If it's overhand, it's normal kinematic sequence. Okay, great question.
And we learned a lot of that from, in fact, he recently passed away, Phil Lodges.
Great guy.
Amazing stuff. And we were fortunate with Phil in that we were able to capture all his 3D data, remember?
Yeah.
And that was the first time we saw a lot of change in
one of the best finesse wedge players of all time. Yeah. And it's really, it's really interesting to see how different the kinematic sequence of the wedge is. Maybe let's talk about that for a second. The kinematic sequence for the wedge is so different, or the finesse swing, I should say, not because the full wedge is normal. Mm-hmm. But for a finesse wedge where you're just trying to do underhand tossing, it's not really power, it's accuracy. And what we see on that is we see the blue and the green lines flip. Now, what does that mean? So in the kinematic sequence, remember, you have your lower body is red, your thorax is green, then your lead arm is blue, and then the shaft is yellow. We always want to see the hips accelerate, slow down, then the thorax accelerates, slow down, then the arms. Well, in the best finesse wedge players, the blue and the green switch, which means that the thorax is actually moving faster than the arms, which is really weird because you think about the lighter segments move faster, but not in the finesse wedge. And the reason that happens is because think about what the best finesse wedge players are doing. They are releasing the golf club. And when they're releasing the golf club, it stops the arms. That's right. So basically, remember, the next segment, when the distal segment accelerates, the proximal segment slows down. So in a great wedge player, as they're literally releasing the club, right? So they literally feel like they're casting. Like the best wedge players, they're not like this. They're not maintaining. They're releasing. So as they release that golf club, it kills the arms. And when the arms get killed, the speed goes down. So we don't see the arm speed, but the trunk keeps going. Because the only thing that slows down the trunk is the arms. But if the arms aren't moving, then the trunk keeps going. And that was really, that took us a while to really, that's where James Seekman really helped us understand why that was happening. But as soon as that flips back the other direction, you're back to your normal power sequence. Okay, so then we got another one. Would the kinematic sequence in a bunker be a finesse sequence or a full swing? Great question. It's the same thing I just said. So we see both. So it depends on the distance of the bunker shot and how much energy you need to do it. Again, if you feel like you need to create more power, there are some, I want to say rare bunker ones where it's a normal kinematic sequence. Most bunker sequences are finesse because think about it, you're killing the lower body. Best wedge players, I remember like Luke Donald, Kevin Knox, some of the guys that literally it's like their lower body doesn't move, it's their upper body kind of going through. So you'll see very rare where you're going to get the big hip movements, but you know, if you've got a 60-yard bunker shot,
then you're going to see it. I mean, that's where, you know, when we have Voki out here, Voki talks a lot about what he sees on tour, and that a lot of players, once they get set in with that they have more pressure this way, they keep this leg quiet. So they're allowing the club to pass this leg before they push off it.
Well, and watch in the best bunker players, I think when you watch the best bunker players, and you watch the trail leg, right? When we watch them in here, as they hit, this leg stays on the ground. Well, most of them, that right leg stays on the ground. Maybe lifts up a little
unless
bit.
It's a long bunker shot.
Unless it's a long bunker shot. If you watch me do a finesse shot, right? If I'm going to do a finesse shot, if I'm going to try and, let's say I'm going to go 10 yards, I'm going to try and throw this ball 10 yards, okay? Watch my lower body. Watch how much my lower body moves. Okay, here's 10 yards. How much does my lower body move? Why would it move? Like, it wouldn't make any sense if I'm going to go 10 yards to try and do this and this. That would make no sense, right? So the finesse sequence is very much characterized by very minimal lower body movement, more accuracy geared at your purpose. So it looks like we got another from Morton. Okay, with the wedge play, would you say that you feel as if the start of the finesse sequence would be more of a dropping of the wedge rather than a leading of the grip? That's exactly what we were just talking about. So
pulling the butt end of the club. But again, to your point, rather than standing here, getting in here, and feeling like I'm pulling the handle down, it's definitely more of a falling of the club. It's more of a falling of, I feel like the head is actually falling down. And then, you know, at impact, I'm a little bit more this way.
Yeah, let me show one thing that we've seen on motion capture. So, you know, we're looking at the club face, right, with the best wedge players. And if you look at the best wedge players, they don't take the club back like this. They take the club back like this. Most of them. There are some wedge players, obviously, that do the opposite. But most wedge players, the ones that are statistically the best, you're going to see a lot more rotation, right? That exposes the bounce of the club, so the leading edge is in there. Now, if I do this, right, and I'll turn back this way. If I have a little bit of rotation, and now you hold on to the handle, well, now the face is pointing out here, and I'm leading into the hosel, right? So literally, if I open this up and I do this, there's nothing good going to happen right here, right? So literally, how do they get the face back to square? Well, what they do is they feel like the face cast or release, right? And that's what gets the face back to square. They can't hold on. They're going to release, and that's what squares the face up. That's why you'll see the lead elbow bend. We call it spaghetti arms. Some of the best wedge players. It's not this full swing. I would say, Dave, there's really three golf swings, right? There's the normal golf swing, which you use with literally every ball on the ground that deals with power, right? So if you're hitting a 3-wood on the ground, if you're hitting a wedge on the ground for power, that's one golf swing. Then there's the specialty shot, the ball on the tee, driver, right? That's a specialty shot. That's different. You're trying to hit up on the arc. Your attack angle is going to be a little different, so you have to be able to take all this. And then I always think driver's not the same as iron. That's why you have some players that are great iron players, but they're horrible drivers. They don't realize they're two different swings. And then there's finesse wedges, right, which is a whole different animal. If you can get your players to understand that there's those three types of swings and master those three swings, you're going to have a whole lot of good.
Yeah, and I think that's what technology has done today, is that we're getting guys that now understanding that, using TrackMan. And now you're starting to see guys that were great iron players that are starting to become great drivers of the ball. Like a Justin Rose or something like that.
Great question. Anything else, guys? Here we go. So how does bending the lead arm help to generate more power? Would this go against extensor action? Yeah, okay. So I'm assuming we're going back to full swing now. We're talking about, we're talking driver, right, Charles? Is that what you're asking? Just want to make sure. So I think we have our 3D system here, so I can actually show you something on this too, believe it. Literally, think about this. In your kinematic sequence, we measure 4 segments. We measure the lower body, we measure the thorax, we measure the lead arm, and the shaft. So there's 4 segments. So imagine you've got 4 segments in a whip. Well, just like a whip, if I had a very short whip and I was going to try and whip Dave with like a 5-foot whip, okay, that would hurt. But if I made a 10-foot whip, I had more time to create this, it's going to hurt even more. So if I can add more links in the chain, more distance in the whip, I can create more power. Well, keeping the arm straight, okay, keeping the arm straight is a great way, again, to control accuracy, take away more variables. But if I'm like J.B. Holmes, I bend the lead arm, and now if I can time this link, I'm adding another link in the chain, right? So I think, let me see if I can actually bring up a kinematic sequence here for you guys to see. Let's take a look and see if I can, let's do portion of screen, share, and I'm going to share part of my screen. Hopefully you guys will be able to see here. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go see if I can grab this. I am going to, doesn't want me to do that. Hold on, let's try this. Slide this over. Okay, so let's go and see if I can bring up J.B. Holmes. We have so much data here. See if I can find it. And maybe. Let's see. Huh, shoot, I don't think it's on this database here, but hold on, let me check one other thing. Nope. Let's go see who would be another good option. JB must be on one of my old computers. Sorry about that, guys. I'm trying to think. A good guy bends their elbow. Let's see. There'd be an exaggerated one. Let's try. You know, maybe one of our long drive guys. Let's try.
Ryan with us?
Actually, you know what? Let's take the current. Let's do Justin James. Justin will be here tomorrow. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Let's go to find a good one here. Pretty good. Okay, so you can get an idea of kinematic sequence here. You can see sometimes you'll see a little of these little waggles here, and you can see this one here on the red. Sometimes that's because they're moving so fast. That could be the sensor moving a little bit on there. So just imagine these are smooth here, but you can see how he goes red to green to blue to yellow. Speeds with a club 2,800 degrees per second. That's like insane velocity. So he's got some incredible. And the world's last year when he won the World Long Drive, it was 226 ball speed, just to give you an idea, right? So you know. Average tour players between the 169, 172, and this was 226 miles an hour. So now let's go in, and I'm going to add something and see, because I've actually never looked at this on his, but we're going to look at it right now together. Let's go, and I'm going to add in another segment of the kinematic sequence. So I'm going to go to the trail forearm angular velocity. Or no, sorry. Yeah. Let's see. Okay. So now, notice what I just did there is I added in another segment. So now we were looking at lead arm, then trail. Now, the guys that bend the elbow, what they tend to do is they tend to bring in this other chain, right? Yep. And they bring in the right forearm. But to time this is very difficult. But look how beautiful Justin does. He goes lower body, thorax, arm, that's the lead arm, then the trail arm, and then the club. You're just adding another sequence. Now, I can show you, Dave, just by looking at lots of players, a lot of times when they do this, that trail forearm is way out of sequence too. J.D. Holmes looks very similar to this. It's incredible how they match this up. So remember, you don't have to just have 4 segments in the kinematic sequence. You could actually, you know, this is why if you run like a Happy Gilmore, you know, you need some lower body segments in your kinematic sequence, right? You can do things to improve. So that's kind of how I would do that. Okay, so let me go back to where you can kind of see your question. So hopefully that answers your question about power. So I think that literally anytime you can add a link in the chain, you're going to potentially increase the power.
I would say one thing there is that potentially the reason you don't see a lot of people doing it is because tour players are kind of create accuracy. They already have speed. Yeah. But if you think about your average club member that has maybe 92, 93 miles an hour club head speed, adding an extra lever is not going to affect their dispersion that much, and it might add some distance. So it's definitely something that if you're dealing with somebody that struggles with distance, having them bend that arm a little bit, it's going to give them that other lever that they might be getting some.
Let me say two other things too, because I didn't answer your question all the way. Is first of all, does this matter? Does it matter, like, if this is bent, can you hit it? Can you hit it shorter? A lot of people think it's because the arc is longer. Well, the arc matters at impact.
That's right? Where extensor action.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's here. By the time you get to impact, you want to make sure that's straight again, right? We're talking about bending it at the top, right? And then the other thing is, if you think about how far the club travels, that can add to speed, right? So that's why, you know, like a John Daly or when the club gets over here, think about this. And a good friend of ours, Sasha McKenzie, talks a lot about this. Dave, if I put you on a chair, it was like on a rotary chair, and I put you 5 feet from a wall, and I got behind you and I slammed you into the wall, right? I have 5 feet to create a ramp. Yeah. If I move back 20 feet and I get this running start, it's probably going to hurt more when you hit the wall, right? So literally I have more time to accelerate the club. But the farther I take this, right, I can actually have more time to accelerate the club. So bending the elbow can actually increase my acceleration ramp. Put it that way.
And that brings up a good point in that if you look at a lot of LPGA tour, there's more girls on the LPGA tour that overswing and have a longer backswing. Now, we always equate that to better mobility. But in many ways, remember, a lot of girls, you know, they may be shorter in stature. They're using a long driver. The fact that they have these long swings, the timing and the rhythm is beautiful. Yep. And they're creating more speed as a result. So the average player could definitely do that. Yep. And then to your point on extensor action, you know, extensor action is that width. But, you know, a lot of players on the PGA Tour, yes, they have extensor action, trying to get the arms away from their body. But initially on the downswing, they get narrow, and then they get wide again. So bending, you're just getting narrower as long as you get wide.
Yeah. Hope I asked that question. Yeah. Charles, hopefully that answered your question. Anybody else? We'll stay here until all your questions are answered. And guys, we're going to do this probably a couple times a year, at least, maybe even once a quarter. So we'll start posting other dates when we have these Q&As, and give us feedback on if you like the technology, Zoom platform we tend to like. If you had any issues with hearing anything or seeing anything, we'd love to get your feedback, just because that helps us make these better in the future. We might even have, in some of the other tracks, if you're in some of them, we'll have some of the other instructors that'll be doing some Q&A times too. So keep your eyes and ears opened up for that. Any other questions? We'll give you a 10-second count, and then we'll wrap this up if there's no other questions. Good?
One more coming.
Okay. Work with the player who tends to always set up close. Best way to get them more square. Good question. Okay, so can we talk, let's real quick, I'll talk vision real fast. Yeah. Go through. So the most common thing you see with players is their aim right, which is what you just said, Dane, close to the target. So I think a lot of us have seen amateurs that do that. And I think I can't prove this, Dave, but I think, why don't you move that chair just a little bit this way now. If I were to look at how most players set up, okay, if I were to set up, I'll make sure you can see me. If I set up, okay, most amateurs, when they look at their target, I think they use their toe line to line up to a target, right? So they kind of use their toes and they try and, I don't think they're good at lining the club face up and their shoulders. Well, most people, right, most players have been told, keep their right foot square and turn their left foot out. Okay, now when you do that, this line looks like it's left of the target. So most people visually will align their body right because they think that they're aligned left because the foot's flared out. Does that make sense, right? So just the fact that you visually have your right foot square and your left foot out looks like you're aiming left, so most people do this. So one way to kind of fix this, and this is one way you can try, is have them set up with their toes square, right? Set up to the target. Once they get to their target, so let's say that's my target, square, then say, okay, now go ahead and turn your foot out, But don't worry, you're still aligned to your target. Don't modify, because they'll go, wow, now I'm aiming left. You're like, no, you can change it, and you just flare your foot up, right?
That's why we also put a shaft on the heels too, so we can see that.
If you really want to look at it, look at the heels, not the toes. But I'm saying what they usually look at. The other thing that you can try is two things we cover in the class, which is basically spot alignment, right? Make sure that they're trying to pick a spot in front of the ball, right, to line up to instead of a distance that's 200 yards away. Sometimes you can experiment with a spot behind the ball, especially for the ones that are right-eye dominant, right-handed players. So shorter distance to line up to tends to help sometimes. And then one other one that one of our advisory board members, Dr. Robert Jacobs, kind of showed me was if I take, I throw my golf balls out the door, we'll use this one here. If I take a normal alignment, normally what happens here is this, is players will look at from behind the ball, they'll look at their target, then they'll walk in and kind of go from binocular vision to this side-on, right? So they're looking with both their eyes there, and then they kind of turn this way, and now things get really haywire, right? So one way to prevent this, or to do this, is basically start binocular and finish binocular. So in other words, I pick my target, pick my spot. Now keeping my spot, what I'll do is I'll walk over here first, get far behind. I'm now binocular. Look at my space, my spot. Draw a line with this binocular, not turn, and now walk in.
Yep.
A lot of times you'll see a lot of success with that. The players actually aim up. It's a little weirder, they kind of around, but sometimes that can help.
Yeah, I mean the other one I see too, Greg, is obviously right-eye dominant players. So when you're right-eye dominant, a lot of times you instinctively feel like you're tracking this way. Because when you look at the target, you're focused with your right eye, so you feel like you're open. Right. And when you set up square, you feel like you're aimed away to the right. So the other way to do that is if they are right-eye dominant, and obviously you guys know that you can check that test by just doing this and seeing, what eye they look out of. What I would do is actually have them come into their setup with their right eye closed and set up with their left eye, and then open the right eye.
Those are some great techniques to experiment with. Okay, hopefully that answers your question, Grant. Okay, looks like we got another one. Nick, Shake. How do we help people with balance issues to create power? So that's another awesome question. So let's talk about balance real quick. Now, most people know that, and we talk about this in level 1, that balance is created by 3 things, right? It's created by your vision. The C helps you maintain your balance. There's fluid in your inner ear. It's called your vestibular system that helps like a level, maintain your balance. And then there's your internal GPS, right? This internal GPS is called proprioception. It's little nerve endings that tell your body where your parts are in space, right? If you asked in the past, even 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, if you ask most medical professionals how many people have a problem with their internal GPS, proprioception, they'll tell you 90% of the people have problems with that. Well, some of the recent research that we've been doing, some of the stuff from FMS and SMA, from our medical track, is starting to show that honestly, most people don't have a GPS problem. Okay, most people have a good balance problem. What they have is a movement problem. That internal GPS, the way those sensors work in your body is by movement. They're stimulated by movement. So as your ankle wobbles and moves, it stimulates those sensors and tells your body where your brain is in space. Well, it makes a lot more sense that people sprain their ankle or get injuries or get mobility problems, and now they can't move. Because they can't move, the brain's not getting the information. So just so you know, what we're finding is that if you improve mobility, so if you improve the joint's ability to move, you actually are improving their ability to balance. And then reflexively, it'll help them with their power. So I would tell you that if I have somebody that I think is having power issues, and I think it's because of a balance issue, now I think it's a mobility issue. Yeah. Right? So flexibility works. All your stuff to get mobility becomes a primary focus of our programs. And I feel like once they get that mobility back, you don't have to do anything. All of a sudden, their balance is better. Yeah. Right? I think that's really, really important. So that's from a physical standpoint. Yeah. I don't know from a golf standpoint.
Well, I mean, the only thing, obviously, with balance, I mean, a lot of the things is where is it at address? How are you testing it? So I think a lot of people have the misconception that when they get in their setup posture, where should my weight and where should I feel? I like it over the arches of the feet, not too much in the heels, not too much in the toes. And again, things like hip hinge, their ability to hip hinge, that's a correlation to us with setup balance and where their balance is.
Like people get too far from the ball, get on their heels. And
far too back. So when you're talking about creating power, creating that optimum place, and then understanding, and this is kind of leading into force, pressure, weight shift, is that where is it going, and how do you load, how do you move, how do you use the ground? And again, I just think I think like ankle dorsiflexion, squat, things like
But
that.
you're back to mobility.
Big
Yeah,
predictors.
yeah. So I think I would really look at that mobility issues and make sure set up. Okay, let's see. And remember, if we don't answer your question all the way through, just shoot it back to us again. Charles, can you briefly run through steeps and shallows for different lie conditions? Do you have tips on controlling low point? You know, we have, I think, and I think I have James's over here. I think we put this in your online class. I could be wrong, but I think we have an entire list of steeps and shallows that are on there. But I even made a note in case somebody asked this question here, Dave. So let's go through a couple of these real fast. So from the wedge standpoint, some of these can be a little confusing. So let's run through some of these steeps and shallows. Let's go through some of the basics first. Why don't you set up down the line? Let me just set up with a wedge. Yeah. I got notes from James in case this came up. Okay, so in the setup, right? So for alignment, the more open you are, I think it's pretty obvious that steepens the shaft, right? So the more closed, more shallow, right? For your posture, right? The taller you are, the more shallow it can create.
Yep, because the shoulder's going to move flat.
The more over the gate, the steeper. So the more bent over the fence. Yeah. Okay, so and think about this. You asked about lies. Think about how the lies could affect these, right? So different lies make you more over, more up. Okay. In the let's talk about the backswing. So on the backswing, if you take the club above the plane over here, it tends to steepen. If you take it below, it tends to shallow, right? So that's obvious one. Face angle. So if you're close club face, close to the shaft, that tends to steepen.
Yep. And
more you open it up, that tends to shallow. Right? Let's see. Okay, the trail arm, trail elbow. If we look at the trail elbow, some players fold the trail elbow. That makes it steeper. When they fold it, the club tends to react by folding that way in the elbow. Yep. And then the straighter they keep it, the more round, like you did over here.
Stricker.
Yep, like a stricker. Let's see. More, let's say, rotation. So more forearm rotation makes it more shallow. So good. And then less rotation makes it steeper. And again, different lies can create these different movements here. Excessive rotation in the pelvis tends to shallow. All these things that are turning the club in, right, are doing these, right? If it's more of a stable lower body, it's steeper, right? Let's talk about the release of the club. So angle of attack, same angle, same from down the line. So if you're released, if your plane goes underneath, that's going to be shallow, right? Obviously, and if it goes above, that's going to be steep. And then let's see, trail arm rotation on the downswing, right? The more closed you are, the steeper it is. So if you rotate it closed, it'll steepen, and if you rotate under, it'll be more shallow. That's from your down the line. Now from face on, again, the only reason I'm going through this, I can't remember if we put these notes in the online class, but we'll do it anyway. Face on, let's go ahead and set up. So a weak grip tends to steepen it, and a strong grip tends to shallow it, right?
Because the weak grip tends to cup it, which gets it steeper. The strong grip tends to have more rotation.
You get the more rotation coming out, right? So the head, let's talk about head alignment. If you tend to be more behind it, that's shallow.
Yep.
Right.
Your shoulders are going to work on the flatter plane.
Farther forward with your head, the more steep.
That's why if you lean more left, it gets the shaft up.
Okay. The softer your elbows, the steeper. So that we call that spaghetti arms. We talked about that. Spaghetti arms tends to help steepen the shaft. The straighter, if you go more like full swing, like a stricker, that's more shallow, right? Stance, narrow stance tends to steepen. Wide stance tends to shallow.
Narrow, a little bit more wide. Again, like in a bunker, you're going to be more shallow.
Lead foot, if you tend to flare the lead foot out, tends to steepen.
Yep.
You can get more rotation coming through. And square tends to be a little more shallow, right? Ball position, the farther back, the steeper.
Yes.
Right? And let's say forward, more shallow. Shaft lean. Obviously, the more shaft lean, the steeper. Less shaft lean, the shallower. Yep. And let's see if there's anything else. Center of pressure, it's kind of like we said, the same thing with the head. More towards the target, steeper, away from the target. So those are kind of, let me think if there's anything else that would affect your, So that's from James, just in case somebody asked that question. Those are some of the steeps and shallows from a stance standpoint, right? So I would say, if the hill's trying to make you fall down,
Yep.
right, it's going to adjust your center of gravity that way, forward, tight.
And you talk about low point, Greg, low point, obviously that's a physical issue too.
Yeah, I would tell you something. You mentioned Phil Rogers,
Yes.
right? One of my favorite people in the world. Let me give you a little tip on the lies that Phil Rogers taught me.
Which is actually a good one because a lot of people don't talk about it.
Yeah. So literally, Phil used to say, if the ball's above your feet, okay, so let's say you've got a little shot and the ball's above your feet, the ball's going to want to tend to draw, it's going to tend to hook, right? And then when the ball's above your feet, it looks like it's closer to you.
Yeah.
But actually, if you measure it, it's actually farther.
Well, because he does it from the distance from.
If I take from your toes to the ball, if I take a distance from your toes to the ball, and then I take you on a uphill, or take where the ball's above your feet, and you set up, it actually is farther away, even though it looks closer. Yeah. So what he has you do is he has you get closer to the ball. It feels really weird and would choke down.
Sorry.
You close and choke down, and it kind of negates the slope. It's amazing. Like you can actually fade the ball really easy from
the ball above your feet.
And it does a lot of things we just said from steep and shallow, kind of neutralizes it. And the opposite is when the ball's below your feet. Below your feet, literally, you're closer, right? So literally, you get farther away, and then basically you choke up on it, and it negates it, and you can actually do draw. So it's something you'd want to try. So I think that's okay. It looks like we got one more here. We probably got time for this. Probably our last one here. Is eye dominance possible to ever change from one eye to the other based on the strength of the eye? So you do not want to turn people into pirates. You don't want them to wear a patch and try and convert over there. In fact, we get this question all the time. I feel like eye dominance is one of those things that they're always going to be that eye dominant. I don't want to say that if you damage the one eye, your other eye can't work, because both eyes are working, right? But to me, there's no reason why there's an advantage for. Let me back up. A lot of people say that there's an advantage for cross dominant versus same side dominant, like Jack Nicklaus, Tiger Woods. They're right-handed, but they're left eye dominant. I think that's true if you don't understand how eye dominance affects you. Yes. Once you understand that same side dominant has a little different visual perception, you can be Brad Faxon, who's same side dominant, and be one of the best players ever to play the game, right? So I feel like as long as you make the modifications, like for a right eye, for a same side dominant player, move the ball slightly back, a little more open with your putting, and you tend to see it better. That's right. There's no disadvantage, right? So I don't think everybody needs to look the same on a video camera. You just need to understand what's the best putting swing drive for you, and then based on your physical limitations, and I'm not saying that's a limitation, based on your physical skills, match the one that works best for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other one is the reason we do the eye tests into and why you should do them. And I think there's one area that you should do them, and that's when people get in their mid-40s to mid-50s or early 50s. Your vision changes a lot. And I've noticed my distance vision gotten blurrier. And does that affect your ability to putt, to see your target?
That's because you're getting older. So I'd say just like vision is just like everything else. With time, all of a sudden your ankle might become a problem. You realize it. Your hip becomes a problem. Your vision changes. We all know that. That's why you always want to continue to monitor and make the modifications. But knowledge is power. You don't need to. Everybody doesn't have to have hip range of motion. Everybody doesn't have to have each other. We can build a swing that works. Okay, guys, so hey, I really appreciate everybody tuning in. Again, if there's any feedback for us, we'd love for you to even send Ruben at customer service any feedback, or email either one of us so we can make these better. You'll see some future dates for this. If this was helpful, please let us know. The more responses we get about doing these, the more of them we'll do. It's very easy for us to do these. And thanks from all of us here at TPI.
Thanks, guys, and hope to see you at the World Golf Fitness Summit.
Yeah, or level 3. See you guys.